Welcome everybody. Dr. Hendricks is here to do a presentation on how to write a case report and articles for publication. She said that you guys can ask questions along the way, so I'll be up here to take any questions you have and relay them to her. But without further ado, this is Dr. Hendricks here with her presentation. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Hendricks, all the way from California.
Thank you so much for having me. Please let me know if there's any technical glitches, if you can't see me advance the slides or you can't hear me. A little introduction about myself. I know some of you may have heard my presentation early this morning. I am currently working at TUCOM, California, which is also where I graduated medical school. I did my pediatric residency training at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. I've now been back at TUCOM since 2009. As a faculty member, and I'm currently their Assistant Dean of Clinical Integration as well as their Chair of Pediatrics. I am also the Associate Editor of the American College of Osteopathic Pediatricians e-journal as well as the Pulse, and I just recently became an editor for the JAOA as well. So I love to write. And it's certainly one of the things that I encourage a lot of our students to do. It's one of the ways that you can really have your application stand out is to have some publications by the time you're applying for residency. So I encourage all of you to dabble in writing. And what this presentation today is going to be is it's all about what type of publications are kind of the lowest hanging fruit. So if you don't have a ton of time, you don't have a ton of money, you're not able to do a clinical investigation or a clinical trial, what are other ways that you can kind of get your feet wet in terms of publications? And I think two of the lowest hanging fruits are case reports and review articles. So this presentation should be fairly short. I tried to make it as straightforward as possible and kind of break things down into a stepwise fashion. And I'll make this presentation available, not only this recorded version, but also just the slides themselves to all of the ACOP students and ACOP members as well, so that you can follow along. So let's go ahead and get started. If I can get started. I have no disclosures to make at all. The outline of our presentation, we'll talk a little bit about reasons to publish. We'll talk about the different types of research, and then we'll be focusing on those two, the case reports and the review articles. So reasons to publish. If I was there in the room, I would pose this as a question to you, is why do you want to publish? Since it's going to be a little bit tricky for us to communicate back and forth without stopping for a Q&A session, I will just answer the reasons to publish. I see the primary reason for students to publish is to get experience with publications, as well as to build up their CV. Some of the more official reasons to publish would be to make yourself matter, to get your name out there, especially on a particular topic. If most of your publications follow along the same theme, you can basically establish yourself as an expert in a particular topic. Career building, certainly. Funding and formal requirements. So as you move into residency, certainly as you move into fellowships, you may have the requirement to have a certain number of publications. And then improving your own skills, self-improvement. So I think all of that can be somewhat relatable to you guys, but like I said, I think the primary reasons are just to get the experience with it, as well as to build up your CV. So if you viewed my presentation or you participated in my presentation this morning, you know that I reference a lot this NRMP Program Director Survey, right? So this is the most recent one. It comes out every 2 years. This is the one from 2016. And I just wanted to point out way down here at the bottom that still, within their top reasons as to why they're choosing an applicant to interview, as well as reason for why they're choosing after they've interviewed people. It shows up kind of in the same place for why they're selecting people, why they're ranking certain people. It's this demonstrated involvement and interest in research. So it is certainly one of the ways that you can just make your application stand out a little bit more above people who haven't done any research or don't have any publications. Once you move into residency, we can certainly see that there as well, research and publications is one of the ways that program directors judge how successful their residents are. So if you come in with publications already, then they may see you as being able to be more successful once you're in the residency program. So what are the different types of clinical research? So this is kind of the classic pyramid of clinical research. And like I said, we're going to be picking at the lowest hanging fruits, the things that you don't need a lot of funding, you don't need a lot of time, you don't need to do a whole lot of other things in order to get these. So we're going to look at case reports and then systematic reviews. If we're looking at meta-analyses versus a systematic review, a meta-analysis basically is just involving, it's still taking a bunch of different studies and putting them together, but then it's using different statistical methods in order to be able to compare and contrast those studies. That takes a little bit more of a level of expertise than just a systematic review does. So those are the two that we'll be talking about. And we'll be starting with case reports. So case reports, if we look at the Journal of Pediatrics, which is the American Academy of Pediatrics journal, and we look at their case reports, we can see, and this is their most recent issue that they just came out. I just did a little screenshot. And we can look at the case reports that they have published recently. What I want you guys to look at is look at the general names of them. These are all open access in the most recent issue, so you can go to the Pediatrics website and you can click on these and kind of look through the case reports and see what they contain and how interesting they are, or how they're written. So the first step of writing a case report is to find an interesting case, right? So ideally it's something you've personally been involved in. So during your pediatric rotation, did you see something that was particularly interesting or particularly unusual? You can also ask your pediatric attendings if they have any cases that they're interested in publishing. I know most of us who have been working in the field for a while certainly collect super interesting cases, and oftentimes we don't have time to be able to dedicate to writing up those cases and publishing them. So having an eager student approach us is a fantastic way for us to be able to get our case published, and it's a fantastic way for the student to be able to get that experience as well. So it's a little bit of a win-win situation. So that's the very first thing, is find an interesting case. Step two is now you need to investigate. How is your case unique? Because you can't just report on any case. The first thing you're going to do is a lit search, right? So you're going to search the patient's age, the patient's gender, the patient's disease process. You're going to look and see how their treatment was, how the patient responded to the treatment. And what you're looking for is your case unusual in one way or another? So is it an unexpected presentation of a common disease or finding? So most recently, I'm actually in the process of publishing a case on a patient that had very common sequelae, or not common sequelae, but very well-known sequelae of acute otitis media. So she ended up having mastoiditis and intracranial processes, cerebral abscess, kind of all of the intracranial disease sequelae that you can get from acute otitis media. But what was interesting about this patient is she was older than what we usually see these patients presenting with, and she initially presented with acute abdominal pain, which is incredibly rare, actually has never been reported before. So something like that. What's unusual or what's different about your patient? It could be an emerging disease. So it could be a disease that we just don't know a whole lot about, or we haven't seen a lot of. Zika would be a great one currently. Or is it an unusual combination of events and conditions? So it's just a bunch of different scenarios that when you put them together, it is very rare and unusual to see all of those things together. Or did your patient respond to the treatment or the management in a different way? Did they have unusual side effects? Did they have an unusual interaction? So really what we need to show is that your case is publishable because there's something different and distinct about it. There's something that people can gain and learn from reading your case. Could it shed light on the pathogenesis, right? So does it illustrate either a new theory that's emerging, or does it question an old theory that's been established as to why and how that disease process works? And then you're going to gather the data, right? So you need to remember to be HIPAA compliant. You're not going to take home any stacks of information that maybe you're printing from the patient's records that have their name or their date of birth, no identifying patient information on them at all. You're going to gather the history and physical of the case. You're going to gather all the studies that were done. It's fantastic to be able to have images to go along with your case report. So if you have radiographic images or images of gross pathological findings or microscopic findings, those are fantastic additions to a case report. All of the lab results. You're going to gather the hospital and outpatient progress notes, the discharge summaries. Those are fantastic. They really summarize the entire course of the patient. And then if the patient had to see multiple specialists, you're going to get all of the specialist notes as well. So you're gathering all of the information about your patient and this particular disease process or this particular state. And then this is key, getting consent from the parent or the guardian. So, you know, if it is the example of your attending says, oh yeah, a couple years ago, I saw this interesting case and this and this and this happened. You could still go through the process of, number one, making sure that the case is unique and publishable. And then number two, gathering all of the information. You will want to try to contact the family to let them know that you're going to be publishing or attempting to publish that case. Because even if there's no identifying patient information, if it's such a rare or unusual circumstance, just by reading through the case, somebody may be able to identify your patient with the features that you were describing. So it's important that you get consent from the family. I find that most parents, most families are very willing, right? If they have something unusual or different happen to their child, and you say that it's for the sake of educating other physicians or other clinicians about this particular process, they're usually very willing to be able to sign their consent. Some journals have their own consent forms that they want you to use. Some journals don't ask for consent forms at all. Other journals are fine with just a generic consent. But generally, I think it's a good idea to at least contact the family and let them know that you'll be trying to publish. Then you're going to gather references, right? So you already did your initial lit search to see how rare this is. And now you're going to be gathering the references that are more specific to your case. So what are some abstracts? What are some review articles? Are there some similar case reports that maybe have some differences, right? Maybe the ages are different. Maybe the initial presenting findings are different. You're going to gather all of that information. And as you're gathering that, especially when you're looking at the similar case reports, you'll be noting what journals they were published in, because those are journals that might be interested in publishing your case report as well. So that's what I mean by target journals. And then are there any textbooks, right? What are the relevant reference texts that talk about the disease process, talk about the possible theories that you might be able to reference in your discussion section as you're talking about what makes your case unique and different? Step 5 is finding suitable journals for you to publish in. So you want to think about who your audience is. So do you only want pediatricians to read it? Do you want family physicians to read it? Do you want mainly students to read it? Do you want osteopathic pediatricians to read it? Right? So you're thinking about your audience. You want to think about your field. So since this is at an ACOP meeting, I'm assuming that your field is pediatrics. The impact factor. So each journal has an impact factor. And an impact factor is basically the annual average number of citations to the articles published in that journal. It's an imperfect number. The higher the impact factor, it's supposed to be kind of the more quality the journal. It means that the articles in that journal are being cited all the time. It means a lot of people are reading those articles and using those to build their further research. So impact factor is an interesting thing to look at when you're looking at where you're going to try to publish your publications. In order to find the impact factor, you can Google the journal citation reports, the JCR, to be able to locate impact factors. It'll talk about the specific fields, the number of hits, all those type of things as well. Ideally, you want a journal that is peer-reviewed. As you look into the number of journals there are out there, there is a very broad number of journals out there. When you are writing your CV, and as a student, it doesn't matter as much, right? You could publish in like the ACOP Pulse, which is essentially a newsletter, and you could give an opinion piece, and that would count as a publication on your student CV. As you move further into your career, you're going to split your publications into publications in peer-reviewed journals and publications in non-peer-reviewed journals, right? So those would be like the articles that you write for newspapers or magazines or newsletters that are more opinion pieces. The peer-reviewed publications tend to be the ones that carry a little bit more weight, especially as you're looking for advancement in your career. So ideally, you want a journal that is peer-reviewed. The ACOP e-journal is peer-reviewed, but it's not yet available on PubMed. Having something available on PubMed is really nice, because then as people are looking you up, they'll be able to find the articles that you've published on PubMed. The ACOP e-journal, that is our #1 priority, is to get it on PubMed, but we still have a couple more steps. We've already made the first initial steps to get there, but at least it would fall under the peer-reviewed category, which is very nice. And then the likelihood of publications. So I recommend that you choose at least 3 to 4 journals that you want to publish in. And maybe the first one is a far reach, right? Maybe the first one is that Journal of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Pediatrics journal. You will see as you look through them that they tend to only publish physicians and students that are coming from certain institutions and not necessarily osteopathic institutions. But maybe that's where you want to start. So that might be where you initially send it. And then if they happen to turn you down, they happen to reject you, hopefully they give you some useful information about how your article could be stronger, so that then you could use that to revise your article. And then you could submit your article to a lower tier journal and then a lower tier journal. Certainly have humility about it. Don't feel bad about having an article rejected. One of my colleagues who I absolutely adore, he's actually head of our research program over at Toro, he was giving the example of how he had submitted one of his research articles to a publication that rejected him. And then he ended up submitting the exact same article to a different publication that's lower tiered. And it was published in that lower tiered journal. But then the initial place that rejected him referenced and cited his article a number of times, right? So there was a couple editorials on his article, and he was thinking, well, how funny that you rejected my article, but now you keep talking about it. So don't feel bad if your manuscript gets rejected. Just keep trying, keep at it. If you know that it's a good manuscript, then it's worth it to put in the effort to try to find some place that could publish it. The nice thing about the ACOP e-journal is we are a smaller group, and so we have the ability to have a lot more mentorship and have a lot more assistance and really help, especially osteopathic students who are interested in pediatrics, move towards publications and be able to get those publications. And then once you find those journals, once you've identified the journals that you want to try for, read some of their published case reports. So as you start to write your own case report, you can, set it in the same format as theirs, so you know what they're looking for. And then review the author instructions, right? All of the journals are going to have pretty specific author instructions, and you don't want to have your manuscript rejected because you missed something very simple as like a formatting line, or you didn't put in your abstract the way that they had hoped that you would. So how do you find journals? Like I said, during your lit search, especially as you're finding similar articles, as you're finding case reports and a similar topic to the topic that you're writing on, see where those have been published. Look at the journals that those have been published. Ask your attendings what journals they like. What are some of the pediatric journals they refer to often? BMJ case reports, the British Medical Journal's case reports, that is a fantastic journal to be able to publish your case reports in. It's looking specifically for case reports. So that's a really good one. You usually need to have an institutional license, which I think most medical schools do have institutional licenses for BMJ case reports. Otherwise, you have to pay a certain fee. If your institution, if your medical school or your hospital does not have a license, ask them to get one. It's the institutional license is not all that expensive. And then I found this list under MD links, right? So I just Googled pediatric journals, and there's this whole list that's much further extensive, you know, beyond the bottom of this page. But you can actually click on each one of these is actually a link on the live website. And so you can click on it and then take a look at those different journals. Remember, you're looking for journals that are peer-reviewed and journals that can be accessible via PubMed or the ideal journals, otherwise at least journals that are peer-reviewed. And then you're going to write your rough draft, right? So you're just going to put it together. You're going to give background information on the disease process, and I'll give you more information about each of these sections as well. What are your learning objectives? So how is your case unique? When people read your case, what do you want them to take home? What do you want them to learn about your particular case? You're going to describe your case in detail, write a nice case presentation. You're going to discuss the specific things about your case and how it's different. This is where you're going to discuss your literature review, what you found and what you didn't find. And then what are your take-home points? So that's your rough draft. Your rough draft, I recommend you just try to sit down and write it. So just sit down and get something on paper. And once you have something on paper, then that's what you can really work over as you build up and flesh out your manuscript. So step 7 is fleshing out your manuscript. So now you're going to actually delineate specific sections. And depending on the journal where you're trying to publish, these sections may be a little bit different. But for case reports, they almost all follow the same general format. A title, an introduction, the case, a lit review, a discussion, and a conclusion. And now I'm going to go through each one of those and just give you a little bit more information on each of those. So as we look at the title, your title needs to be informative. And if you remember back to, I showed you those case reports that were published in Pediatrics, the American Academy of Pediatrics journal. Their titles were basically just the disease process, right? So your title needs to be informative. It needs to be accurate about what your case is about. It needs to be succinct. It can't be this long, rambling title. And then an important thing is it needs to be searchable. So if somebody does a Google search or a lit search about a case that's similar to yours, they need to be able to find it. So put in whatever the key elements are about your case. Have that stick out in the title so people who are reading it know what it is. So for the case that I referenced, the one that we're in the process of publishing or of getting published, I think our title, and I can't remember which title we ended up landing on, but it was something like, neurologic sequelae of acute otitis media presenting as acute abdomen or something like that. So it kind of lets you know everything right up there in the title, and then the reader can read about more specifics. The introduction and background. You're going to give an overview of the general problem. You're going to offer a single sentence description of your patient. So how does your patient fit into whatever the disease process is or what the problem is that you're presenting? You're going to discuss how your case is unique. How is it different from all the other cases out there? And you're going to discuss how your case contributes to scientific knowledge. So what are the learning points that you hope that people will get as they continue to read through your manuscript? And then your case. You're going to give a detailed description of your case. And this is given in a very logical and common format, right? You'll start with the patient's chief complaint. How did they initially present? You'll go through their history and physical. You'll present their diagnostic studies, any treatments that they were given and how they responded to the treatments, and then what their ultimate outcomes were. So I feel like that is the simplest thing to write, is you're just putting together everything about that case. You had already gathered all of the information from the patient, and now you're just putting it all in order. And then you're going to put in your lit review. This may be part of the discussion section. And this is where you're going to specifically discuss the disease, the treatment, right? Really focusing on your case and how whatever has been published prior is a little bit different from what your case is presenting. And then your discussion section, once again, how's your case unique? Now is when you're really going to hit home your learning points, what you want people to take home. The discussion section is by and large the most important part of a case report. The This is where you may offer new hypotheses or new explanations, right? If it doesn't fit with what has been explained in the past, then you need to try to explain it. Try to give examples of why your patient presented in this way or why your patient responded in the way that they did. And then finally, the conclusion. And the conclusion may be the final paragraph of your discussion section, or it may be a separate paragraph. And it's basically summarizing everything. It's giving your take-home messages, your key points. What are the last things you want clinicians or readers of your manuscript to be able to take home with them? What are your recommendations? You know, as they move forward, what do you want them to think about when they see a similar case to what you had? And then, if there are any potential for future studies, that's where you would suggest them, that potential future studies may include X, Y, and Z. And then a quick note on citations. Citations are so important. It's important that the citations are all in the same format. There are now a bunch of different citation tools out there that make citing things very easy. They'll actually, you know, typically if you have an article open online, you'll be able to go to a citation section, choose which type of format you want, AMA, APA, whatever, and then just be able to copy and paste that citation directly in. So make sure they're all in the same format. Cite all material that's not considered common knowledge. So as I go through and I edit articles, I think that's one of the most common things that I tend to do, especially in the background introduction section. You know, as people are introducing a disease process, they may throw in some statistics, or they may tell me some epidemiology. If it's not common knowledge, I want to know where they're getting those specific numbers. So make sure that you're citing it. Cite, you know, anything that you happen to pick up from either a textbook or an article that you're reading. And then make sure that you're using either endnotes or footnotes. Once again, make sure you're using them appropriately. Make sure that they are in the same format that whichever journal you're submitting to that they want, and make sure that you're being consistent with it. And then finally, make sure that the works that you've cited are accurate. I use the term findable, which means, you know, sometimes, especially if it's taken you a long time to get this manuscript together, sometimes you'll have jotted down a certain reference that then you put in to your citations, but now that reference is no longer valid. Maybe it's a website that's gone defunct, maybe it's out of date. So make sure before you submit for publication, make sure that you can actually find all of your references again, everything that you have cited, and make sure it's the most recent publication on that subject, right? If it's a very rare disease topic or something that's very unusual, then maybe the only articles you can find are articles from 10 years ago or longer ago. But generally speaking, you want to use the most recent articles. And the way that you can do that is, let's say that you find an article that really seems to match your subject material, but it's from 2005, and you want to know if there's anything more recent in that. You can typically, either using the Google literature search or using PubMed, you can typically look at articles that cited that article, and so they'll usually be on the same topic and they'll be more recent. So that's one way to make sure that you're really getting the most recent articles on there. And then your first revision. You're gonna, first of all, just read over your manuscript now that you've put everything together. You're gonna read over for the overall organization of it. You're gonna read the flow of the manuscript, right? So is there noun-verb agreement throughout? Are you using past tense the entire time or present tense the entire time? Is there coherence of the discussion? So the discussion section, does it all flow together? Is it at the right depth that you want it to be? Does the conclusion effectively conclude everything that you've described above it? Go back to basics. So when you're looking at your paragraphs, make sure they're starting with topic sentences so that people can really read it well. Use details to support generalizations. Use summary sentences to put things together. And then make sure that you're using transition statements between paragraphs so that everything flows nicely and smoothly, just like with any good writing. And then same with your sentences, right? Check your sentence structure, check your word choice, make sure there's good noun-verb agreement throughout, make sure your punctuation and spelling are flawless. And then hand it over to your attending or somebody that you trust to read it over and give initial suggestions for edits. And finally, you're ready to submit it to an appropriate journal. So whatever your top tier journal is, go ahead and submit it to them. If they reject you, hope that they give you some feedback so then you can incorporate that and do some more edits and then submit to the next journal. Humility is key. This is not the time to feel really invested, like, gosh, I put so much work into this and I'm just going to be heartbroken if it gets rejected. Like I said, it was very reassuring to me to know that my colleague who has, I don't even know, hundreds of publications, that even he still gets rejected from the journals that he wants to publish in. And sometimes those journals aren't even rejecting you for the right reasons, right? They're still super interested in your topic. They're super interested in your particular research, just for whatever reason. It ended up not working with them at that particular time. And then rewrite and resubmit as necessary. And then once you're published, update your CV and bask in your own glory. Send your article out to everybody. So that's what I have for case reports. I'm going to move on to review articles, and I'm going to shift my position because I'm sitting kind of uncomfortably on this couch. Sorry about that. So we'll move on to review articles, and then I'll open it up for questions. So review articles. So one of the primary sources of review articles in pediatrics is Peds in Review. This is also the official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Peds in Review is a fantastic resource in which you could learn a lot from. And you can see their articles, look at their titles. They are really just looking at one specific disease process, and then that's what they're going to review everything on. So similar to pediatrics, this is the most recent edition. You should be able to go here, click on them, and read through, get an idea of what review articles look like. So for review articles, and actually, if you did a case report already, you may be able to write a review article on that same topic, right? Because you've already done a lit search. You've already chosen a topic, done a lit search, gathered all of the reference material, and now you could just summarize that reference material. So in that way, you may be able to get 2 publications on the same topic, so demonstrating your expertise, that are different, right? So one is a case report, and one is a review article on that topic. So the first step is to choose a topic, something that truly interests you, right? You're going to put a good amount of time and effort in this. So don't just choose a topic that you think somebody thinks would be good for you to write about. Choose it on something like a question that you have. Talk to your faculty or attendings about your topic to try to narrow the focus. Because generally speaking, if you were, and Peds in Review is exceptional, but generally speaking, if you were to choose something like neonatal hyperbilirubinemia, there's going to be way too much information on that. So get a little bit more specific. Are you looking at hyperbilirubinemia in the breastfed infant? Are you looking at hyperbilirubinemia in the formula-fed infant, in the premature formula-fed infant, right? Try to narrow your focus so that you're not going to get lost in a swamp of different articles and references. And pose your topic as a question to be answered or a problem to be solved. So what in particular about this topic are you interested in? Are you interested in seeing if hyperbilirubinemia resolves more quickly in formula-fed infants, or if it lasts longer but is less serious, has less dangerous sequelae in breastfed infants? What in particular are you interested in? And then you're going to do a lit search. You're going to gather your references. So journals, and I say follow the rabbit hole of citations, right? Because you're going to find one article on your topic, and then you're going to look at the reference section of that article, and you're going to click on the ones that seem like they are relevant to what you're looking at. And you're going to be keeping track of everything. And I have a slide in here about organization. But follow that rabbit hole down so you get a good collection of different references on that same topic material. Once again, make sure that you're getting the most recent material on it. You don't want to be basing all of your information on stuff that was published more than 10 years ago. You may use textbooks as well, reference texts. And even in textbooks, there's a reference section, right? So you can even look at their citations and pull up some of their primary citations so that you can use that in your article as well. And then different websites as well. And websites also have their citations. So look at them. So follow the citation route down in order to increase the number of reference texts that you're looking at or references that you're looking at. And remember to refine and narrow the focus, because if you don't stick to your question that you have at hand, you could get lost in a swamp of just way too much information and not knowing how to organize things. And sometimes it's in this process, as you're gathering the references, sometimes that's when you narrow your focus, when you realize, whoa, there is so much information on this. I really want to look at this particular age range or this particular aspect of this disease process or something like that, so that you can really narrow things down. And this is key for review articles, is to organize your information, because you are gathering a ton of different references, and then you're going to summarize those references in a way that really makes a nice cohesive article. Excuse me. If you want to be systematic in your organization, I recommend you create and update a spreadsheet, right? So in that spreadsheet, you're going to have the journal name, you're going to have the article title, you're going to have the date of it, you're going to have your summary of that particular, like, what do you like about that article, what's in there that you think is useful. You're going to organize your material based on its relative importance. So if you have a bunch of articles that are around the same topic or the same specific area, then cluster those together in your spreadsheet. Include a notes section so that you know why you have these particular articles all put together, and include your citations. That can be one of the most frustrating things, is after you've put everything together and now you're trying to, put in your citations into your manuscript, and you've forgotten to copy and paste a citation of a particular article, so you have to go searching for that article again. So in your spreadsheet, make sure you're including the citations in there. You can find them again. And then find suitable journals, right? So this is copy and pasted from the case reports, because you're going to do it in the same way. Think about your audience, think about the field, think about the impact factor. Ideally, it's going to be something that is peer-reviewed with a high impact factor. Think of your likelihood of publication. So choose a few different journals, and know that you may need to submit to more than one. You can only submit to one journal at a time, right? Anytime you're publishing anything, they want to make sure that they have, if they were to publish your manuscript, they are the exclusive owners of that manuscript. So you can't try to publish in multiple journals at the same time. So it's just one at a time. And then once you've chosen those journals that you're interested in, look at their samples of published review articles so you can get an idea of what type of thing that they're looking for. And review their author instructions on review articles so you know the exact format that they want you to put your manuscript in. And then you're going to write an outline, right? So you're going to start with, what is your topic? What's the significance of your topic? Right? So why is it important? Why do we need a review article on this particular topic? What background material is relevant? What is your thesis or purpose statement? Right? So what is the whole purpose behind this review article? What are your primary resources? So looking at your spreadsheet, which of those resources are going to be the ones that are going to be most helpful in delineating what you're talking about? And what's the best way for you to present your data, right? Because that spreadsheet is probably going to be pretty long. So what's the best way to organize it and present your data so that it comes across as a nice cohesive article? And then writing the manuscript. So this part seems so much more simple than a case report. It's going to include an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And I'll give you a little bit more information on each of those. So for the introduction, you're presenting the relevant background material. So tell me about the epidemiology of the disease that you're talking about. Tell me how common it is. Define different terms and concepts, and that is so important to happen in the introduction. Explain the focus of your manuscript. What was your particular question? What was your theory? And then reveal your plan of organization. Let the reader know what's going to happen next. first we're going to discuss this, then we're going to move on to this, and then we're going to wrap it up by showing how those are connected or whatever. And then in the body, you're going to follow your outline, right? So that outline that you wrote first, you're going to follow it along. Build your manuscript around your key points. Don't let your sources organize your manuscript, right? And that can be tricky because sometimes you get so invested in certain articles and you think certain articles are so great that you end up kind of following their schema. You don't want to do that. Make this your manuscript. So take whatever is useful information from those particular articles and organize them in a way that makes sense for your manuscript. So that what you are writing, you're in control of your writing, right? You're in the driver's seat. Don't let the other resources that you're reading kind of take over. Integrate your sources into your discussion, right? So this means that you're not just reporting published work. So so-and-so found blah, 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 blah. That's not the purpose of the review article. The purpose of the review article is to summarize other findings, to analyze it, to explain it, and to evaluate it, right? You're taking a bunch of different sources and then you're putting it all together. Generally speaking, in the body, you're going to start with a generalization. So this is the general idea. And then you're going to become more detailed. Then you're going to start giving key details from the different resources that you have. And then you're going to get general again, and then key details in that general idea. And then at the end, you're going to summarize it all together. So it's kind of like this ladder. In your conclusion, you're going to summarize your key points. You're going to explain the significance of all of your findings. And now, for your conclusion, it's going to move from a detailed level that you just ended out and move to a more generalized level. So you're returning the topic to the context of the introduction. So you're wrapping everything up really nicely. And then if future research could be found, you know, if as you were putting all of this together, you found that there's big gaps in what has been published on this particular material, then this is a fantastic place to say where research needs to be done in order to fill in those gaps. Citations, this is the same as citations from before. First revision, this is the same as from before. And then editing, same as from before. And then finally updating your CV is the same. So that is everything that I have, and I see that we are, we started pretty late, so it looks like we are ending at the time that our session was supposed to end. But if anybody has any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. What questions do you guys have, if any? Are you guys still there?
Yeah, sorry, we're taking a question. I'll unmute and relay in just a second.
Okay.
Oh, actually, you know what? I can just give her the mic. I forgot we got a wireless one, so just 1 second.
Hi, I was just curious about authorship. I know, like, you guys are doing research projects, you're working under a professor, and so, you know, his or her name would be like the first, but in terms of case reports, if it's your own case or, you know, with an attending, I was just curious how that works.
I couldn't hear that.
Really?
Can you try again? Sorry.
Hi, how's this? Is this better?
I think so.
Okay, I was just curious about authorship. If it's a case report that's, you know, like your own case, I mean, granted you'd be working under a preceptor or an attending or something, how does that work? I'm just curious.
In terms of where, like, are you going to be the sole author, or will you have multiple authors, and where should your name go?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it depends really on your attending and on the person that you're working with. Generally speaking, for authorship, the most senior person puts their name at the end of the article. So if it's a case report and there's two people, I like to have the student have their name go first. So that delineates that they did the most work on it. And then I have my name go at the end. So that delineates that I'm the most expert of the two of us. But yeah, that's generally what I recommend. There are some attendings that like to have their name first, which is fine too. As the student and the one doing the work, you're kind of at the mercy of whoever you're working with, and where they're comfortable putting their name. So that would be a discussion that I would have with them before you submit it to publication. Is it okay if I put my name first? Because that will look really good on your CV the more times that you have your name first on publications. And you can even say something to them to kind of lead them in that direction of, and then as the most senior author, we could put your name last, or something like that. I don't know if that answers the question.
She said it does.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like that's all the questions we have for you, Dr. Hendricks. Thank you so much for your time again today.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day.